I'm going to detail all the parts you need to do an LS swap on an OBS Chevy. I'm going to detail all the specific parts I bought from my build and their prices. Alongside that, we'll keep track of a minimal build, which will be just the parts you absolutely need if you're trying to do this on a budget. Subscribers will also get access to a spreadsheet of all of the parts I bought along with links. So find that subscribe button and mash on it. Alright, let's get into it. We're going to start out with the engine. This part is pretty non-negotiable, but there's a lot of different things you can do to spend more money or spend less money. Probably the cheapest thing to do is find a wrecked car or truck with the engine you want in it. Buy it, take the engine out, and hopefully the transmission too, if that'll work for you, and then part out the rest of the car. A lot of people do this and come out money ahead. What I ended up doing was going on eBay, finding a 6.0 and purchasing it from a auto wrecking yard on eBay. This engine cost me $2,200 shipped to my door. Although it wasn't the cheapest option, it was convenient and I was really happy with the service. One thing I will mention is when you get your engine, make sure you get it complete. You want the wiring harness. If it's drive-by-wire, you want the gas pedal. You want to make sure you get that mass airflow sensor. One way to spend a ton of money is to have to go buy all this stuff afterwards by buying just an engine on an engine stand. The harness that came with the engine is factory quality components. You do not need to go buy an aftermarket harness, especially if you're going to get one of the ones made overseas that you don't know the quality on. If you get the harness with the engine, you know it worked with the engine. This is one of the biggest pieces of advice I took, and I'm glad that I did. One way to spend a ton of extra money is to go buy aftermarket harnesses or go buy the Holley system. Now, some people need the Holley system. If you're one of those people, don't listen to this. But somebody just trying to do a quick swap and save money, don't fall for the Holley hype. The next thing you'll need is an oil pan. I bought mine for about $264 from Speed Engineering. You're gonna need some O2 sensors, 2 of them at least. If you're not running cats, that cost me $95. And spark plugs that cost me $50. I got a Tick Performance Saturday Night Special Torque Max Stage 2 cam, as well as their 660 lift dual valve spring kit. The cam was $390 and the valve springs was $250. This is probably a part that I overspent on. The main reason I picked this cam was because it's the cam that was in Red Hoonigan, and that truck really inspired this build, so I wanted it to sound the same, but I digress. Let's get back to the build. We also ended up breaking off a rocker arm bolt, so I had to buy a new rocker arm bolt set for $25. For headers, I went with Schoenfeld 1302 LS1-C ceramic coated headers. These were $754. If you get the ones that aren't ceramic coated, I think it's about half the price. You can also just use the standard exhaust manifolds to save a little cash if you want to do that. To mount the engine, you're going to need some motor mounts. I went with the adjustables from Dirty Dingo. These cost me $109. To round out the engine, I went ahead and bought a new water pump for $102 for some insurance and a cold air intake kit from Speed Engineering that was $169. If you buy a used engine, you'll most likely have broken manifold bolts. The easiest way to get them out, if you have aluminum heads, is to MIG weld a nut to the top of them and then just unscrew the nut with a wrench. With all those parts, it brings the grand total for the engine components to $4,239. If you're going the super budget route, let's assume you get a wrecked car and you get the engine out of it and you come out paying $500 for the engine. Still need the oil pan, still need the O2 sensors, still need the spark plugs. You're not gonna do a cam or valve springs, you're just gonna stay stock. You can get some exhaust manifolds for free off of your engine. And let's say you go with the cheaper Speed Engineering motor mounts that are $40. And then instead of a cold air intake, you just go with one of those little cones that stick out of the front of the engine. They're about $50. That's gonna bring your grand total to $999. So it's true, you can get an LS engine ready to swap for less than $1,000, especially if you just make up the number that you pay for the engine. But hopefully this gives you an idea of the kind of sacrifices you'll have to make to get that done. You're gonna have to do a little work taking the engine out of the car. You're not gonna have that sweet chop, you're not gonna have headers, but what you are gonna have is a really reliable engine in your truck. The next part for me, at least, was the transmission. You may not need to upgrade your transmission, but my truck came with a 4L60 and I wanted to have a better transmission in my truck, so I went out and bought a 4L80. I got this transmission off Facebook Marketplace and it cost me $1,200. I also bought a new transmission cross member from Dirty Dingo for $200 and a braided transmission line kit off of Amazon for about $30. Since I got a new cam, I needed to get a new stall converter. I went with the Circle D 245mm Pro Series 4L80 torque converter with a 3200 to 3400 stall single disc lockup. This beauty ran me about $1,200. To round out the drive line, I went ahead and got a brand new drive shaft made for $400. That brings our grand total for the transmission components to $3,030. If you're going with our budget build, you're not going to do any of this stuff. Your cam's stock, you don't need a new stall converter, you're not going to replace the transmission and whatever you got unless you absolutely have to. So it's going to cost nothing to do this step. The next piece, and I've separated this out because it was pretty expensive and it's not really necessary unless you live somewhere like Florida like I do, but it's the AC. So I wanted to get the AC working in this thing. I ended up buying a Sandin AC compressor for $269. The Dirty Dingo mount was $274. I bought the matching alternator mount that was also $274. We also got a new condenser, dryer, and evaporator core for the air condition. The condenser was $73.79, the dryer was $24.79, the evaporator core was $57.79. I also bought the air conditioning lines from Quick Performance. They fit perfectly, and they were $264. The only caveat was that I needed to use a dryer off of a 95 truck instead of a 96. By far the worst part about all of this was installing the new evaporator core. It's deep under the dash, it's really hard to get to. It's really hard to put back together. The last thing we had to do was get exhaust put on the truck. I went with Spintech 6000 series mufflers and got the exhaust done at McDonald Muffler in Mobile, Alabama. They charged us $600 to do the exhaust, and that included everything from all the pipe, an X pipe, and the Corvette style exhaust tips. And they had it done in about a day. Tony, do you like the truck?
Yes.
I also got the truck professionally tuned, and that cost $400. Time for the final breakdown. This entire build cost me $9,607.57. That's a grand total of everything that I bought to get this truck on the road. Percentage wise, that breaks down to about 41% for the engine and engine components, 30% for the transmission components, 15% on the exhaust, 10% on the AC, and 4% on the tune. There are most definitely ways to do this a lot cheaper than I did it. There's a dozen different ways to skin this cat. You can do it a lot cheaper, and you can damn sure do it for a lot more expensive. I highly recommend creating a similar breakdown to avoid budget surprises. The upfront planning has already saved me several costly mistakes. Thanks for watching, and I hope this breakdown gives you a realistic picture of what a project like this actually costs. Hit like if this was helpful, and subscribe for more videos because next we're tackling the interior, and then after that the suspension.